So Ryan Gosling stars in a new noir crime thriller where mood and style land on sparse minimalism, the artistic substance percolating underneath. Nicolas winning Refn's independent hit, based on a novel of the same name, Drive. In Los Angeles, a getaway driver demonstrates his skill and expertise in evading the police, and allowing two thieves to get away clean, after disappearing into the parking lot of the Staples Center, just as the game lets out. By day, he works for Shannon both as a movie stunt driver and fixing cars at his auto repair shop. Meanwhile, the driver gradually gets involved with his neighbor Irene and her son Benicio, drawing closer to her, where her husband Standard sits in prison. Soon, Shannon uses driver's talents behind the wheel to rope in businessman Bernie Rose into investing in a race car venture. However, Rose has a shady association with Jewish gangster Nino, who once broke Shannon's pelvis after a deal gone wrong. Soon things get strained and complicated for Driver when Standard is released and rejoins Irene and Benicio at home, but Irene's affection for her neighbor remains undeniable. Yet soon thugs come around working Standard over, trying to force him to repay protection money from his time inside. This puts Benicio and Irene under immediate danger, and Driver volunteers to help Standard clear his debt as the getaway driver for him and associate Blanche. However, it all goes wrong when the shop owner in the valley fights back and shoots Standard dead during the heist, forcing Driver to evade another car of men, intent on killing them too. When hiding out at a motel, Driver forces Blanche to give up who set them up, right before her head is blown off, and Driver is forced to get bloody in order to make it out alive. This leaves Driver back to Cook, who tasks them with his job and threatens his life in exchange for the name of whose money he has. This all leads back to Nino, who is trying to shut down the East Coast mob from setting up a rival operation in LA. Driver wants to give back the cash and cut loose, but Nino sends one of his goons to pay him a visit. When Driver encounters him in the elevator with Irene, he lays a passionate kiss upon her, before violently attacking Nino's man, crushing his skull in the process. Now with Nino backed against the wall, he leans on Bernie Rose to tidy up his mess. Rose immediately kills Cook, and soon is forced to slit Shannon, but he won't give up the Driver. The retaliation continues when Driver targets Nino, running him off the road, and stalking him onto the shoreline, where Nino is drowned to death. With the blood on both men's hands, Rose tries to negotiate an amicable end to this business, but there'll be no clean getaways for either one of them. So Drive saw its North American theatrical release on September 16, 2011, directed by Nicolas Winding Refn, adapted from the book by James Salas. The film went on to gross $81.4 million against a $15 million budget, making a very strong success for Refn after his very acclaimed hit with Tom Hardy called Bronson very much put both of them very strongly on the map. And the book by James Salas was published 6 years beforehand in September of 2005, quickly optioned by producers Mark Platt and Adam Siegel, originally to be produced by Universal Pictures, helmed up by Neil Marshall of Dog Soldiers and The Descent fame, and starring Hugh Jackman, but by the early 2010, they were no longer involved. Marshall, Jackman, and Universal Pictures all bowed out of the project, but in this entire time, one screenwriter was actually working on adapting the book, named Hossein Amini, who actually had a Best Adapted Screenplay Oscar nomination for the film Wings of the Dove back in the late 90s, and had some uncredited work on Martin Scorsese's Gangs of New York, but it was very much a difficult process trying to adapt the book because it's very much non-linear. And that's so much the tricky thing of trying to find how to decipher it into a film format that's not too confusing. And it's a very lean book at about 158 pages, so there's not a lot there, but a lot of things that kind of reconstruct and kind of adapt into a different medium to kind of work very much in its own way. And so it came out to Nick Winding Refn here. And he was very much, again, a guy on the independent scene, and as the entire thing fell out with Universal, they decided, well, we've got to go independent with this whole thing. We've got to go off to Cannes to get the financing. And so some people who are involved with kind of distributing his other films before this, very much put up some money for it, and they got some money here and there, of course, up to the $15 million budget to go off and do this and be distributed from Film District. And Nick Refn has had many different influences upon the film, such as Point Blank, Two Lane Blacktop, Michael Mann's Thief, and most particularly in my regard, and especially a lot of other people's regard as well, is Walter Hill's 1978 film The Driver, because it deals with so many of the same vibes, tones, and approaches to storytelling as Drive is, because it all deals with a getaway driver who has a very strict set of standards and rules on how he deals with other criminals. And so much the stark minimalism is what Walter Hill used in that film, not just cinematography-wise, using very stark locked-off shots, not a lot of camera movement, but also how he wrote the film. Because none of the actual characters in the film have proper names. Everyone's the detective, the hookup, the player, the driver. Because Ryan O'Neal's character in the film is just called the driver. Same as Ryan Gosling's character in the novel and the film is only called driver, or kid in dialogue. So it's just like, it's so much a clear reflection upon the two different sources, maybe even influence upon James Salas himself, what he did with that character and kind of what they do in the film as well. So much goes into so much that enigmatic, mythological quality they give to that character of the driver in Drive, such what Gosling's character is wrapped up in and has that aura around his character so much, feeds into what Refn is doing with the atmosphere, the mood of the entire film. So much that starkness and how the dialogue goes along in the whole film, where you want to have the audience feel so much, go into so much that European style that so much this Danish filmmaker is very much attuned to have much more expressionistic style of how the film goes along and informs the audience of certain things. You can feel the film instead of being told so much different things. Like, you can tell just as much to the audience with how the actors work a scene and how the music is used, how the cinematography is used, how the lighting of the scene, the mood of it all informs the audience of what you're doing here. So much a thing where you don't have to use dialogue as much to inform what the characters are about and how the relationships are working out in the entire film and how the mood of the entire story moves from one scenario to the next. There's all filmmaking stuff. There's all so much using the full gamut of things you have at your disposal to tell the story to the audience, make them feel what you want to feel so much. And this approach kind of takes on sort of a meditative quality in some sequences in the entire film, but still creates a lot of great tension and suspense. Like the first sequence in the film, where Driver's actually doing that first heist. And it's such a great, masterful piece of craftsmanship because it's very particular about the point of view, because you'll notice in the entire sequence, the camera never leaves the interior of the driver's car. It's always inside that Impala, so you're always getting his point of view, what he's feeling, what he's seeing, what he's experiencing. And all the little things you have where he's dealing with the radio, looking at the timer, listening to the police scanner, everything like that. All these little things, the audio and the visual, come together so much, along with the music, to create the tension in the scene, to build it up so much. It's like such a great piece of intelligent work of how they craft that chase, where it's so much cunning. It's just so much of a strategic way of handling it, because we've seen so many car chases where there's some stuff that's very elaborate, some stuff that's very chaotic, very different things all over the place. This one took a very, again, a minimalist approach to the entire thing, because it follows along the intent of the character, his mindset, his psychology, how he plots these things out, and why he's the very best in the business at doing this whole thing. It just sells everything. That's a perfect way to introduce the character, show us what he's about, what his standards are, what his constraints are, what his promise is, and how he executes it so much. It's a great type of thing, just on storytelling, but the way he executes it so much is very, very smart. And the cinematography they got in the entire thing to create the mood for the entire film, from the nighttime exteriors that have that great neo-noir sensibility, and the daylight glow you have here is Newton Thomas Sigel, who came to prominence with The Usual Suspects, does stuff like Three Kings, Confessions of a Dangerous Mind, works on the X-Men films. There's a lot of things in the entire filmography that shows off such a great dynamic and inspired quality of what he does, and he was such the perfect guy to get the entire thing, because shot it digitally in Los Angeles and got all those great qualities. And it kind of follows along, again, from Michael Mann on Collateral, where to use those digital cameras to see deeply and sharply into the night, get that depth of focus. You can get that illumination on camera better than you could through film. So it's much a smart type of thing, and what he does here, just like, again, the nighttime stuff just has that great tension, it has that great quality over just that ambiance that feels, again, coupled with the music that have the entire film, creates a sort of throwback 80s quality. So much of the entire thing we have stuff like, again, Thief, Manhunter, Miami Vice, To Live and Die in LA. So many different qualities of those films that are coming out at that time, hyper realizing that sort of neo-noir style with that slick edge of neon streets and everything like that. It just taps in so much with the colors used. So much they use with the greens and the ambers. There's so much the color tone of this film, and they use it throughout the nighttime, the daylight sequences, all the little things I just like so much. Like I said, there's a bit of a glow to the entire film. When you have a lot of the daylight sequences, what he uses with that daylight looks so gorgeous in so many places. Like certain sequences where you're in Shannon's garage and just kind of pouring in there from one direction. It just creates a great painterly look for the entire film here. Because wherever you use with lenses and lights and stuff like that, just creates this warm tone. Just so many sequences, just makes the film just vibrant, radiate out so much. I like how the film just has a mood from just how it looks alone. You can have stills from this film thrown up on walls and just have them as single images of artistic greatness in its own regard that stands up on its own, but when you couple it with all the other filmmaking tools that Refn puts in the film, it just shines even more, just complements everything he's going for as a full visual package, toned with all the entire music and auditory qualities that he puts into the film. But this film is graced with such a stat cast of phenomenal talent here, starting with Ryan Gosling, who'd been doing stuff like The Notebook, Half Nelson, Blue Valentine, but really wanted to go towards this entire thing because it was such a dark, action-oriented role. So very interesting qualities about it you could really exploit, and found some very interesting things looking through the screenplay drafts about defining the character overall, because you felt like Driver was someone like he'd seen too many movies. And the fact that he was actually a stuntman making movies, felt like the lines between the reality and the illusion of fiction were all bleeding together. So he felt like his own life was turning into a movie. So it's something that really just feeds into a lot of the psychology going on into the later portions of the film here, but I like so much that he's a very reserved, soft-spoken, almost introverted character. Doesn't express himself terribly much, but the few times he does, it really shines through in very different ways in that regard. But see, early on in the film, he doesn't really object to things like Shannon very much seems like an exploitative type of person. He found this guy who's got all these amazing talents, a guy who can drive like no one else's business, so he uses him for the stuntman gig. He uses him off to get this entire aspiration for the racetrack stuff. And now he's kind of going with all the getaway stuff, so like he's kind of using him here and there and everywhere, but it doesn't seem like Driver objects to it because he's kind of this old school character, like he's good at one particular thing. He's an expert at it. And doesn't make any qualms about doing that thing for whatever it is he wants to do with it. Anytime he gets to be behind the wheel of a car, regardless of what it is, that's his own singular driving force in life. So I like that quality of the character. It's so focused, stripped down, and simplistic, and so much an interesting role for Ryan Gosling to inhabit, because you get the entire thing with Irene. Having that relationship bring more warmth out of the character. Having him kind of connect with someone that brings more light into his own life that he really didn't have before. There's actually this kind of solemn, stoic figure to a certain degree. This draws more out of him. And it just creates such a great synergy between the two characters. There's so much of a bond of growing affection and stuff like that. And it feels like even when Standard comes back in the picture, there's still that great bond there, exemplified by the entire sequence where they're in two separate apartments during Standard's welcome home party with the song Under Your Spell. Going over the entire thing is like it bronzes the two characters together. They're just on the same wavelength, and you feel so much Irene's sort of discomfort being back in the presence of her husband and stuff like that after he's been released from prison. So there's very much a disconnect there, when there's very much a strong connection between her and Driver. I like how that brings more into his life, but also complicates, because after Standard, as all these guys come back into his life, wanting to pay off debts from when he was in prison, it bleeds everything together. All the stuff that was easy compartmentalized before is very much getting all messed up in that regard. Like all the criminal stuff he had over here that was very much detached from all the stuff he had good with Irene, now it's all mixed together and it all flows to very messy circumstances in that regard, and that creates all interesting drama of the entire thing. As this character has to
kind of reconcile both halves, where he's trying to use his own skills from this thing to kind of help up Irene, but it gets all just jumbled up and just like it's a mess because there's double dealing, there's machinations going on, people get betrayed, shut up, killed, and stuff like that. It's like it's all going haywire, and he's got no control over it before, because every time he's behind the wheel of the car, he has that control. But now he's just completely off in different directions and doesn't really know how to fix it. And I like how the fact is, when you get the character reacting to the entire things, the fierceness that Gosling puts on the whole thing, the intensity he has when he's up there with Christina Hendricks in the motel room, slowly putting on the gloves, and the intimidation factor and trying to interrogate her, and then the entire thing blows up with the violence. The guy's shooting up the entire place, and the thing where he's got the hammer with Cook, it's fearsome like living hell, just like it's frightening type of stuff. You can just see the trembling sort of adrenaline, all that type of stuff pumping through his veins. All these different sequences shows the violent edge of the character, where once he goes violent, all that stuff's kind of bottled up inside when they really kind of keep simmered down, just explodes out, and just absolutely graphic in that regard. So this shows how much this character can really go to different extremes in that regard once he's actually pushed towards those ends. So it's like, it's magnified by all the stuff with Irene, but further reinforced with all the deceit going on, all that type of stuff, and never more evident than in the elevator scene where he sees the guy with the gun, and he knows the guy's coming after him. And so he does the gorgeous slow motion moment of him giving Irene the kiss goodbye, because he knows this next moment, there's no turning back from this thing. There's no way she can unsee what's about to happen here when he assaults the guy and stomps his skull in. It's a turning point completely. It's like she can't go back from that moment because she's such a character of pure heart, and suddenly he's trying to protect this entire way, that once he goes down that route, she can't turn that page in a certain way. So that's so much so, and so much when you get to the Nino sequence where he goes after him, the rubber mask thing is again feeds in the whole thing of the lines between illusion and reality and stuff like that kind of falling apart, and him kind of, in my regard, pointing down to kind of disassociate himself from his actions, because after the entire thing in the elevator sequence, he kind of feels ashamed by it, and he didn't want to have to do that in her presence. So it's bringing a little bit of a psychological detachment in that regard, trying to put on this other persona while he does this stuff to hunt down and kill Nino. And that gorgeous satin scorpion jacket, just like, it's just another layer to that psychological melding of fantasy and reality. Like, slips on almost as like another part of that mythic aspect of his persona, like it's a superhero costume for him. So I think all this stuff is just a fabulous collection of ideas and imagination and psychological elements, and so much of the purity of what Gosling does in the entire film, to have this very, again, simplistic character portrayed in a very complex way. So all the stuff he's doing with all the subtlety throughout the entire film, it's just absolutely gorgeous. It's so inspired overall what they did to craft this character on screen. It's just an amazing work from screenplay to direction to acting in that regard. And adding to that fantastically is Carey Mulligan as Irene, which is a bit of a change from the novel and the early screenplay drafts, where it was originally Irina. She was very much a Latina woman, and it was a whole thing of, in the casting process, Refn trying to find someone of that ethnicity to kind of spark off the magic he was looking for, and he could not find anyone. And it was Carey Mulligan kind of going through channels, trying to work around to kind of get up to reading for the entire thing, and it just sparked off so well. Just like he rewrote the character to match her, kind of make her a little younger, and of course change the ethnicity, and just it all just wove together with such magic. She's so wonderful in this role because she's got this sweet, endearing purity about herself. She's just so much innocent quality about herself that feels so right for the character here, getting trapped in the machinations of other people who she's attached to. Like all the stuff with Standards, like she did love Standards at a certain point in time, and you see that when he's kind of talking about how they met and everything like that. It's a beautiful type of thing, but everything's been kind of jumbled together, and she's kind of found all this affection for Driver and all that type of stuff, and there's so much connection there, and as Standards stuff kind of muddies up the entire thing, she becomes a victim of his choices and his circumstances, and it very much affects her life in a very negative type of way, and as Driver tries to fix everything, it just gets worse and worse. And so as she is in this situation where driver's trying to protect her, trying to do everything possible, sacrifice anything possible to keep her safe and keep her out of the entire thing. It's such an interesting way of just trying to keep that character pure through the entire film. And when she witnesses some very terrible type of things, at the end of the entire film, she's still pining for him, still pining for the driver. And all the time, so it's just wonderful, heartfelt performance she puts on. Next to Oscar Isaac, who we know is just one of the best actors, period. Him and Standard Gabrielle, he puts together a great performance here. A man definitely of wounded pride. It's like he's shameful about all the stuff that he's done. It's put him in the situation he's been in, but in jail for 6 months and stuff like that. And he's trying to find a way out of the situation. And you kind of feel for him, but you're also kind of like, man, you've really done wrong by this wonderful woman. You've done some bad choices that put her in a certain spot that she's not envious of being in. And all this type of stuff. So it's like this guy's got a certain sympathy about him that he's gotten in this entire thing, and he's under the thumb of these really bad dudes. And that's how the driver steps in and tries to mend the situation by using his talents to get him out of it, to kind of keep Irene safe in that regard. But all that type of stuff, that's just everything Oscar Isaac does for this character. It's just magnificent. All the charisma he has, the certain weariness he has about Driver, and kind of trying to patch up that relationship he has with his wife. It's just like it's great type of stuff to play the woundedness about the character, like I said so much, and all these different sequences where he's trying to claw back a little bit of that manhood, a little bit of that dignity, the integrity and stuff like that, but it all goes horribly wrong for him, and just like he impacts the film in such powerful ways in that regard. He's fantastic in the whole thing. And of course, Bryan Cranston, who is already in the midst of doing Breaking Bad at this point in time, but I like what he does with Shannon so much. Like I said, he's a bit of an exploitative type of guy. He utilizes Driver's talents for his own gain, and all the stuff he has with Bernie Rose, which I'm definitely getting to Albert Brooks so much here, but just the fact that, again, another guy who's got a bit of a wounded sensibility about him. The fact that physically and sort of figuratively in that regard. But the fact is, the guy feels like when he was back in the 80s doing all the big stunt stuff for Bernie Rose and overcharging the crap out of him, I feel like he probably had a lot of bluster back then. But now, after he got involved with Nino and Nino broke his pelvis, and he's walking around with this brace, he's very much this kind of ball of energy in a certain way, but he definitely feels inadequate to a certain degree. He feels a little bit inferior to everyone else around him, so he keeps trying to talk his way through a situation here and stuff like that to kind of pump himself up. He's not the strong personality when he's with anyone in that regard, so I like how Cranston just used all that stuff, and the scenes he has with Albert Brooks are just blockbuster type of stuff. Having these two magnificent actors is working a couple scenes here. They're just incredible type of stuff. They're just so goddamn good. And it's always a pleasure to ever talk about Ron Perlman because he's such a great personality, such a great actor, and such a force of nature as well. And it's the interesting thing about Nino, where they really couldn't really pin down characterization for him, really kind of a dimensionality for him. And it was the whole thing of Ron Perlman loving Whiting's work before this, and where he wanted to be involved with the entire thing. They brought this entire idea to the forefront about Nino being this Jewish guy who always saw himself as an Italian gangster. And given that entire dynamic, that the whole thing of him telling Bernie Rose, the whole thing is like, I'm 59 years old, Bernie, and he pinched my cheek like I'm a little kid or whatnot. Never gets the respect, and he always wants to be a bigger man in that regard. Wants to get that sort of pumped up sort of respect for himself and stuff like that. So it's an interesting dynamic they brought in the character. He's so goddamn good. The entire thing, he's got so much charisma and swagger, and he's always throwing his weight around. And you definitely get that kind of gangster vibe from him so much when he's kind of poking and prodding Shannon here and stuff like that. And it's like all this stuff. He's just an electric personality on screen. He's fantastic in the entire role here. But it's so much Albert Brooks just steals the goddamn show here. The fact that he just went completely outside of his comfort zone, just like nothing he'd ever done before like this. Nothing at all. He's playing a heavy in the film, and he's just blockbuster. I so much was watching this performance this time. It felt like it's kind of channeling a Gene Hackman performance. I could see so much. There's so much Hackman in this entire screen presence. The way he's working the scenes, the charisma he's got, the mastery of command he has across the entire screen here. He's got so much of that going on here, and it's just a great thing seeing how this undercurrent of certain temperaments he has as he entire thing when they're on the racetrack and he's kind of going out to shake driver's hand. And the driver says, "Oh, my hands are dirty." It's like, my hands are dirty too. It's like the little undercurrents he has in those moments, like it shades towards his past. You haven't explained it yet so much, but it just shades towards like, yeah, this guy's been into some shit. He's gotten his hands well dirty, doing a lot of questionable type of things, and how it goes off saying like he was a producer in the 80s, producing a bunch of crap films, that Shannon was overcharging him for the stunt work and everything like that, and it shows like he was kind of a legitimate businessman with the underlying quality of being kind of a gangster here and there. Just like Nino, he's less obvious about it. He's more smart about it. He's not going around with bravado and swaggering around town or whatnot. He's a much more smarter type of guy. He never does want to do that as much anymore, but it's something that's very much in his nature so much. The fact that when Nino gets him all tangled up in this whole thing and he didn't come to him in the first place, now he's got to clean up Nino's mess. And the fact that he just unleashes himself, stabbing Cook in the eye, jabbing the butcher knife through his throat and everything like that is like, oh my God, this guy. In fact, Brooks sells it so well. He has the gravitas for the character here. Between the engaging charisma he has early on, dealing with all the type of stuff, kind of battering back and forth with Shannon about the entire race car type of deal, whatnot, but it just everything he has here is such juice on screen. When he goes after Shannon, when he has to dispose of him, such a chilling scene that's like, it's sorrowful in a way. It's so tragic because you can feel for this character. He doesn't really want to have to be this guy ever again, but he can slip back into it in a moment's notice. He does it when he absolutely has to do it, but he's not proud of it in a certain way. It's like he really would prefer not to have to go this route, but he's got no other choice. So it's like all this stuff that people are forced into these natures. They're kind of underlying. They're not entirely proud of it, but they're willing to indulge in it for the right purposes in that regard. So Brooks, man, he rip roars through the film. He just puts on such a magnificent powerhouse performance here as Bernie Rose. It's just magnificent what he does here across the board. And you can never discuss the film Drive without talking about its iconic soundtrack, like one of the most iconic ones of all time. All the songs they got with it, but also Cliff Martinez's score for it, which is all wonderful synthesizer stuff. Just the mood of the entire thing grabs all the qualities of emotion, suspense, tension, everything that's going on through the entire course of the film is so encapsulated with what he's bringing it all, just like all those wonderful vibes it has just stems out so much, and it just defines the quality of film. All the songs they got, just like every single one of them, it's just razor sharp. Starting with like Night Call with Love Fox and Kavinsky, just iconic type of thing, just going off the entire title sequence. All the stuff from College, Desire, Chromatics, all this type of stuff. It just brings so much more into it. It's like every time you hear those songs, it's nothing but this film. Just like it's just so indelibly connected to Drive. These songs are so just incredible. They just give you so much of that great synthesizer 1980s vibe, with being modern songs in that regard. Like it was just so excellent, getting the entire thing, just like the perfect quality tracks picked out the entire film, which is very interesting because in the UK, BBC Radio 1 DJ Zane Lowe, with the approval of Nicolas winning Refn, did a full rescore on the film with completely different music from bars like Churches, the 1975, Bring Me the Horizon, a lot of other acts as well, and wanted to do it as an experiment to kind of use different tracks to elicit different feelings for it. Now, this was apparently commercially released on many video on demand platforms, but pretty much only available through the UK. Doesn't seem like they kind of extended the licenses between the music artists and the distributors and stuff like that beyond that entire region there. But winning Refn was very much appreciative of it. He thought it was very much a flattering type of thing, that so engaged by the film, they wanted to do something experimental with it. And so they didn't change the frame of the film, but it all changed how it sounded. So I've never actually experienced this version, but there's been a lot of debate back and forth which one they felt was better. Some people felt it was a better version of the entire thing. They felt it was more connected to the film in that regard, but so many people feel like the original soundtrack is so indelibly linked with the film, it's so hard to detach from it to kind of look at more objectively with a different version of it. But that's very much an interesting type of thing. And like there's certain other films over time have gotten like alternate scores. Like I think Life Force had 2 different scores with 2 different cuts of the entire film. Ridley Scott's Legend. There's a Jerry Goldsmith score. There's a Tangerine Dream score. A lot of different things here and there. Even like, interestingly, Happy Birthday Me, the kind of early 80s slasher, when it first came to DVD, had a completely different score. They took out the orchestral stuff and did a completely electronic-based type of thing. So it's like, some of these things have happened over the course of time, and they're kind of interesting experiences to see which one kind of connects better for you overall in that regard. But the stunt work of the entire film is fantastic. The stunt driving overall is just really exceptional type of stuff they did. Not like I said, even though it's a film called Drive, there's not that much in terms of like action sequences, car chase and whatnot. They're very particular, and they very much drive, no pun intended, the story forward. Not just thrown in there, just really needed to kind of live up to a title. It's very much the entire thing of how it feeds into how the film moves along. And the couple of them that they do have just nail it so well, and they have very particular things. Like the first one in the entire film is very much like it's plotted, planned out, step by step, turn by turn, road by road, to get exactly an exact map of the entire city of Los Angeles there. On the one with the heist goes wrong. There's no plan. It's all on completely alien territory for Driver. He has to work his wits and be sharp on his reactions and all the type of stuff to make sure he can outwit and outfox the other guys chasing them and stuff like that. Good type of stuff. Just like everything they do in that regard is really well executed. And the story overall in the entire film is just like, it's such a, again, a nice simple type of thing. This executed with such style and vibrance overall. Just like everything comes together. This is so much what a director brings to an entire project here. You could give this script to any different type of thing. Like the Neil Marshall one would be completely different from this entire thing. Completely different. I mean, you have no kind of resemblance to what Refn did with this version of the entire film. He put in so much, the vibes overall, the vibrance of it all, the entire mood of it all, just this, again, that sparseness he put forward to have you feel more of the moments, instead of being kind of engage with like dialogue and stuff like that and whatnot. Just have the entire film kind of permeate as a washover, a sensation in a certain way. It's such a fantastic thing how he executed that so well. And just like it's just become such an iconic film in that regard. Just like it tapped into something that wasn't quite being done as much at the time. Like retro throwback type of vibes in a certain way that certain filmmakers have gone on to kind of do a lot in like the last decade plus. I've kind of gone on and tried to do that kind of retro type of thing with kind of retro scores and sort of retro vibes and the retro look of the entire film and whatnot. I think I get more of that 80s type of look and style and whatnot. This one's very much like on the pioneering edge of the entire thing. Where it was kind of like really kind of harking back directly to the 80s, but trying to create a certain ambiance about the entire film and engage you in a different type of way than you would originally kind of think this entire thing would go for. But as the book was kind of a sparse type of thing with a bit of an odd structure in that regard, you can see that there's a lot of things that could not overcomplicate the plot and kind of streamline it down and find the ways that could accentuate the emotion and the tensions of the entire story here as well. It's a great story, executed with such brilliance in my regard. It's a fantastic piece of work, and it's like it just compels my interest so much. There's so much the style of film that I'm so drawn towards, and this excels so much. It's definitely a pinnacle in that regard of that type of genre so much. So guys, I'd very much like to hear what you feel about Drive overall, and definitely give me the comments, the likes, the shares, subscribe if you haven't already. There's always a super thanks feature. You want to contribute anything directly to the channel that you especially love. And of course, there's always the Patreon. Early access for a little bit of money here to give us a little more support overall. But anything you do, guys, to interact with the channel, share links around, all that stuff, exceptionally helps the channel in great ways. So stick around, some more stuff. We got more commentaries coming up, more reviews, more retro video series stuff, and all that great stuff. So guys, thanks much. Take care.